Hello, everyone. My name is Jared. I'm one of the team members with Podcast Movement. And of course, joining me today is the CFO and the co founder of SquadCast.fm. We have Rock Felder. And Rock's topic today is how to start and upkeep a fully remote podcast company. This is a topic that I've actually not heard anybody talk about. So I'm really excited to hear what Rock has to say. Rock, thank you for joining us. You've been a big supporter of the podcast community overall, certainly Podcast Movement. So we're grateful for you being available today to talk through this. And maybe for those that aren't familiar with you, shame on them. But let's maybe get them caught up. Maybe you can kind of share a little bit about you and SquadCast, and then we can dive right in.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for the opportunity, Jared. It's a topic that I don't necessarily talk about too often, but certainly think about a lot. Most of the times, what we present, it's about how to record remotely, but this is more so about how to build a remote team, upkeep it, make sure that everything's working together properly. Happy to just dive right into the presentation right now, just because I cover a lot of the things of introducing myself, what we do at SquadCast, and then diving in right into the actual presentation. And of course, I'm going to leave time for Q&A. Love that part. So we'll have some questions coming up at the end. So I'm going to share my screen real quick. All right, there we go. So today we're going to talk about building a remote team, remote podcast company, or just any team for that matter, and how to start and upkeep a fully distributed team. We're not the first company to operate remotely, but we have operated remotely the entire time SquadCast has been around. So we've been around 5 years, and so we have picked up some best practices and tips or things that just like work for us. So we're kind of like pioneers. I don't think we're like the Lewis and Clark pioneers, but we're like on the Oregon Trail where we don't know where we're going. There's other people out there with us, but we're still kind of figuring this out. So this is our experience with building a remote team. So before we get started, I want to tell you a little bit more about me. So like Jared said, I'm the co-founder and CFO of SquadCast. I'm also the co-host of a podcast with my co-founder and our CEO of SquadCast, Zach Moreno. It's called Between Two Mics. On that show, we explore the challenges, opportunities, and new ideas, and talk to people that are really pushing the boundaries of what's possible in podcasting. So I've been listening to podcasts. I don't remember the exact date, but it's ever since the iPod video came out. So whatever date that was, time period that was, that's when I started listening to podcasts. I was just scrolling on that little wheel, looking, just navigating around the iPod device, and found this thing called podcasts. And I was like, what the heck is this? And I think it was like a Freakonomics episode was the first one that I listened to. And I was a big fan and big believer, like right away. I think just that podcast in general was really fascinating and spoke to me. I have like a financial background, so stuff like economics, add in a little freakiness to it. That was like totally was captivating to me. And I think the other thing also was like not just it was like personalized radio. That was like the first thing that popped into my head, because it was like I could find topics that spoke directly to me, and I could start and stop them at my leisure, which was like a game changer to me. I loved it and had been a listener for ever since. But before SquadCast, I was an accountant at a CPA firm. That's why I'm the CFO now. May sound boring to most of you, which I totally get. But and to be honest, some of like the work was not the most exciting stuff. But I also got a tremendous amount of like exposure to a bunch of different business leaders, executives, board members, founders, and that's what really started to get me inspired to do something more independent and entrepreneurial, and really make that jump from the corporate life to doing something more independent and creative, which that's where SquadCast comes into play. So what we do at SquadCast is we are a remote recording platform. We help podcasters and video creators collaborate with their teams and guests to record audio and video in studio quality with anybody in the world. And you really don't need to be a like expert media or tech person to have high sound and video quality. So think Zoom for podcasters. That's like the shorthand that we like to use. The idea for SquadCast did come from my co-founder and our CEO, Zach Moreno. It's the classic scratch your own itch problem where he wanted to create a science fiction podcast with a bunch of his friends. The problem is that everybody was scattered around California. They all had different schedules. So meeting up in person and actually creating this show was not realistic for them. So they thought, well, we could probably do it remotely. And that was another challenge that they encountered was to complicate things even further. To create a show remotely back in 2016 was when Zach was trying to create this show. It was a very fragmented space. So the options available to create a show remotely were either not really purpose built for that use case. So a lot of podcasters were using stuff like Skype, or they were doing like FaceTime and doing what's called a double ender, which SquadCast automates a double ender, but like doing it more analog manual, which put a tremendous amount of pressure on not just the podcast creator, but also like the guest or the team members that they were reviewing. And so with Zach's software development background, he thought, well, there had to be a better way, and maybe we could build this and build something that the community needed. And where I came into the story is him and I have known each other since high school and have maintained friends since then. Obviously went our separate paths as far as careers go. But when he approached me, and I remember this day extremely vividly because I was already, mind you, going through my own personal journey of like trying to make a big move career wise. And so when he approached me about this idea, and it was a mixture of podcasting and remote creation, remote work, two things that I was a big believer in, and then I thought it was going to be an inevitable thing that they both were going to become mainstream. So it was like, again, really easy to get excited about that we were going to be able to help creators and really level the playing field for quality, making everybody have access to quality and having conversations with anybody that they wanted to in the world, and not have to be in the same location, not have to have access or pay for a studio. We bring the virtual studio to them. And again, no sacrificing on quality, ease of use, all of those things. So from day one, we have been a remote company. I'm going to explain why in a little bit later in this presentation, but it really just seemed appropriate to us given the software that we offer and just our general point of view of like where the world is going. So today we are a lean and mean, well, not so mean. I mean mean as in we execute very highly, but we're very nice whenever you talk to us. We have 13 full-time people. So we have folks in California, New York, Orlando, and Mexico, and are continuing to grow and expand, and going to continue embracing the remote culture. So we'll probably have a few other cities and states and whatnot to share next time. So to get into the presentation now, really I want to just start with like, I don't know, busting a myth that your team needs to be in the same location to succeed. From our experience as a remote team, you can still have a thriving culture and be extremely effective and not be in the same location, not be on the same time zones. And so in this presentation, I'm going to share what we've learned, what we've been doing, and what we've seen be effective in our 5 years of growing a remote company. To quickly summarize what I'm going to cover today. So first, I'm going to discuss why remote in the first place, talk about some of the benefits. Mind you, I am a little biased, but there's no doubt that there's challenges with working and collaborating remotely. So we'll get into that on how the tools that we use help us collaborate, how communication is just super critical, like critical in any organization, but I think even more so when you're working remotely. And then closing the distance is going to be the final meat of the presentation. And really what that's about is like, okay, it's great to work remotely, it's convenient, all this stuff, but like, how do you still foster like a thriving culture that like really builds the bonds and within a team and makes things feel unique and special? That the best work environments I have been in, it's always about the people. So how do you make that still happen, even though everyone's like kind of in their own little world at working from home type of stuff? And then please do stick around. We're going to offer you some free stuff at the end. And then after that, we'll wrap up with some questions. So please keep some questions in mind when you are hearing this presentation. Alrighty. So going to go to our first topic, why remote? And it is more than just not having to wear pants. Although that is a benefit, I'm not going to lie. I haven't worn jeans since 2019 and a little proud of that, but it is absolutely more than that. So why is SquadCast remote? So like I said from the beginning, like it just seemed right with like the tool that we're offering, just our point of view of where the world is going. Zach and I definitely had a mutual kind of point of view that like remote collaboration, remote work was indeed the future. But also we're an independent company. And what I mean by that is like, we're not backed by investors, venture capitalists, anything like that. So we had to be pretty capital efficient, and not having to account for an expense in office was something that was pretty appealing when you're trying to be capital efficient. And then also we were just like, when we were building the company for the first, I don't know, 1.5, 2 years before we went full time on SquadCast, we were still holding down our full time jobs. For me, it was in corporate. For Zach, it was in government. And so like we just had to get the work in to build the company wherever we could. So a lot of nights, weekends, stuff like that. So we kind of just started remote within our nature. But it did really feel appropriate given our what we do as a company and a product. And I think also Zach and I were very fortunate to get exposed to working remotely in our previous job. So I think that was something that it wasn't like a question of like, could we do it? We already were exposed to it, and just, it was a easy thing to get mutually agreed upon. And for those reasons, in my opinion, it's just a overall better lifestyle. I like setting my schedule around what works best for me. I think about it as more like work and life are more integrated, which I know can be somewhat of a downside, but like, I just felt like in my previous job, like work was competing with my personal life too much, and everything needed to be secondary to work. And I didn't like that. That's why I left. You know, as good of a job and great workplace as it was, I just felt like we could do stuff better. And working remotely, I just love not having to commute, or at least my commute is way quicker now. I started noticing, like, for me, but I've noticed this with other people, especially at my other job, like going through the pandemic, checking in with them and stuff like that. Like, people are just like living healthier. They're eating better. They're like eating home cooked meals and stuff, because it's just easier to do than, have to meal prep, pack a lunch, all that kind of stuff. And like, yeah, just healthier, sleeping better, happier. Like, that's all good stuff. Another benefit for remote is it expands your talent opportunities. So we're based here in California, San Francisco Bay Area. So there's a lot of great talent in the tech world out here. So that's awesome, or at least there was. A lot has migrated to other places, but really this opens up the opportunity to hire people from anywhere. And at SquadCast, we're really just all about hiring the best talent. So when we were looking for a senior software engineer, it didn't matter where they were located. The best one just happened to be in Orlando, Florida, and his name is Gene. And actually, if you want to learn a little bit more about Gene, I recommend listening to the latest episode of our podcast, Between Two Mics, where I get to interview him on a mini series that we're calling Squad Stories, which focuses on our team members, the squad behind SquadCast. And so, yeah, so that was one thing that is another benefit that we definitely wanted to leverage, but also you can leverage like time and cost differences. So I'll start with time first. We don't use this a whole lot right now just because our team is pretty small, but for larger institutions, or at my previous job, what we would do is we'd have people like basically like staff working like in East Asia or Europe, and whenever they would do the work, their work was done by the end of the day, and managers or supervisors back here in the States, either on the East Coast or West Coast, would have work to review. And so they would review the work, and by the time that their day was done and the folks back in the other parts of the world were able to get work started, they can like pick up where the work was reviewed. And it was just like a very efficient process. That work was always getting done. Again, not something that we're necessarily using at SquadCast a total bunch today, generally because most of us are located in the States, but something I do expect us to utilize a lot more as we continue to grow and scale our team. And then finally, also taking advantage of cost of living differences. This is also something that we don't do, but it is definitely an advantage. Us personally, Zach and I just made the decision that like we're headquartered in the San Francisco Bay Area. We're willing to pay we're willing to pay for like the best talent. So that's really just a choice that we've made as a company. And location really doesn't matter. So whether you're in, like I said, Gene in Orlando or, someone in Mexico, you're going to get paid a rate as if you were here in San Francisco. So that's just a choice, but definitely something that not everybody has to do. Moving on to tools. So I call it working in the clouds, because like there would be no way for us to grow and operate the business like we do today if it wasn't for technology. So just like SquadCast is leveling the playing field for creators to have the conversations and high quality that they want to have, tools like I'm going to mention right now really help us scale our operations to collaborate remotely and still make things very efficient and very effective. So I'm going to go over just like general tools that I think are like must-haves for growing your team remotely. And then I'll definitely talk about like what we use at SquadCast. So the first is communication tools. So tools like Slack, Zoom, or really any type of video chat. And then Loom, which I'm a big fan of. So Slack, like I would say that's where we get most of our work done. A lot of it is just like chatting with each other in real time. There's opportunities for like, having some fun on there too. We have a bunch of different work focused channels, but then we also have some, what I've heard called slack off channels, more fun stuff. So that's really like, it'd be hard for me. It's hard for me to imagine how we would do this without Slack. Like it's been just such a core, tool for us, since day one. And then of course, like having meetings and stuff, it definitely needs to happen. So having some type of video chat is helpful as well. We're a Google company, so we use Google Meets, but obviously Zoom is a very great option as well. Loom is something that I just started recently using because I would kind of want to just like jump, and instead of just like writing something out to people, I want to like jump in a meeting with them and just tell them. But Loom is a way to do that where you kind of can vocalize things to people, show people stuff if you're doing a share screen and stuff like that, but you're not like using up their time. Like they get to review and watch the whatever you have to send them on their time. So that's what I've been using Loom for a lot more. One of the troubles that I've noticed very early on with, or challenges rather, with working remotely and working with people in different time zones and stuff like that, whether it's internal or external, is exactly that, like time zones, date math, time math, incredibly difficult sometimes. So using scheduling apps like Calendly and SavvyCal have been super helpful in just kind of getting around those hurdles where people can just kind of select based on your availability, a time that works best for them. Can seem a little callous if you just like send them your link and say, hey, book a time with me. So there's a way to like finesse and soften the language to not seem so callous, but they are extremely helpful tools. Moving on to project management. So it's a similar communication to something like Slack, because a lot of it is written text form. But the project management software that we use Basecamp, but some other popular ones are Notion. We did use Asana previously, but just for whatever reason, just wasn't the right fit for our team at the time. And this is more so to like track different projects, to-dos, and so people can see like what the status is and what's coming up for them, or what's assigned to them, what's the due date, stuff like that. And a lot of the communication in those apps is really focused on those projects and or to-dos, whereas like Slack is more kind of like free flow in real-time conversation. And then you'll definitely need some type of file sharing services like Dropbox, or again, we use Google Drive because we are a Google Workspace is what their new name is. It used to be G Suite, but now it's Workspaces. So that's what we use for a lot of our apps. And one of the things I've learned with the file sharing is that like you really want to get people in alignment on like how to actually use it. So not just let people create drives and folders and name them however they want. This is something that we're going to need to get a lot better at as our team grows and scales, is because it can get pretty confusing. So what I recommend is like getting in alignment on like having an SOP, a standard operating procedure for how drives and folders are like organized and named and stuff like that, so that it's easy to access. You're not having to like Slack somebody for like, hey, where's this document? Like it should be somewhat easy to find, and it could get out of hand pretty quick. And then, like I mentioned earlier, we do use Google Apps, so Sheets, Docs, presentation, which I'm using for here, all that kind of stuff. But that's pretty similar to like legacy companies because we use like what was it, Microsoft Office with Excel, Word, all that kind of stuff. And then finally, I do recommend that even if you're not recording a podcast, it's beneficial to have a microphone, nice set of headphones. Again, you don't need to break the bank, just something good because I do think it helps you be like seen and heard a lot better when you're talking to folks remotely. But then also if it's external, like it just is a better look when you sound and look amazing, and we get compliments on it all the time. So I think it's extremely effective for your credibility. So highly recommend improving your setup even if you're not recording a podcast. And that is tools. So next up is communication. In my opinion, communication is the most critical thing to running a remote team effectively. I mean, like I said earlier, it's like communication is important in any organization, but I do think it becomes even more challenging when you're working remotely with people on different time zones. So much of our communication is in text form, so strong writing skills are essential. So again, like all those tools I mentioned, Slack, the project-based stuff like Notion and Basecamp, it's all written. So, having those strong writing skills has been critical, and honestly, something I wish I would have taken more seriously back in college, because of how much how important of a skill set it is. And there's just so many opportunities for confusion or misunderstanding. Whether it's over chat, just like not understanding the context or tone someone might be speaking with, or even when you're on a call on Zoom, stuff can cut out. Maybe the sound quality isn't that bad, especially if you're not using SquadCast. And so maybe, things can be misunderstood or confused. So much of our internal communication does need to be written. And that's one of the things that we try to really make the most of in onboarding. At my previous company, like, onboarding wasn't taken as serious for new hires. And I think that's because like it was assumed that a lot of the training would be done on the job, which there's no doubt that like a lot of training and just learning the ropes of how an organization works and how your role fits into that is just going to be kind of understood over time. But what we found is like taking your time with onboarding and really just trying to get folks on the same page, build that trust, learn how you work together, because you're not going to get those same opportunities of being in the office or being at a certain site together to really, teach on the job. Like I think we've, come accustomed to in legacy company environments. I'm also big on like having efficient meetings. I think this is, again, applicable to any organization, but especially with remote because time is just more limited with people in different time zones. There's, generally only a few hours in the day where we overlap, but also I don't want our employees in meetings like constantly. Like one of my big fears for whenever, especially when I call a meeting, is like having people leave that meeting feeling like their time was wasted or like they don't even understand what the purpose was, or they don't understand like what next steps are, stuff like that. So we really need to make sure that the meeting is tight and effective and makes the most use of our time, because we just don't have the luxury of like popping by someone's desk and saying, hey, can you clarify this for me? Or I have a question. I mean, I suppose you could, but like, again, we want to be really efficient and effective here. And part of that is considering time zones, because also like just because people work from home doesn't mean that like we got to set up boundaries as well. Like there should be a time when you are off work, even though you are at home and probably a short commute away from your computer. Another thing for me, and I think this is just a me thing, but because we're remote, we only get this little box of real estate space where we get to communicate, like on a video chat or something like that. So I actually like to try to intentionally use body language to get my point across in a certain way. So maybe I'm having to deliver some less than stellar news and raise the sense of urgency on a certain topic. So I definitely will change up my like tone and delivery and even my body language behaviors just to get my point across even more, or just trying to like inspire and show excitement and get the team excited, especially as a leader. I think that's responsibility of mine. Trying to use body language to like, again, get my point across even more and just like send good vibes over these, over the network, if you will. Moving on to the combination of synchronous and asynchronous communication. This wasn't something that I was familiar with like at all before starting SquadCast. I heard of this. Let's do it async is what they'll say. So synchronous is more like real time. So when we're chatting on Slack or on a Zoom call or whatever, that's more synchronous. Where async is like long written form, documenting something up, giving people the time to really like articulate and document their thoughts. And then on the flip side, giving the rest of the team or reader or whoever is the recipient of this information, giving them the adequate time to review and digest that information and then respond on their own time as well. So we've really started to embrace balancing asynchronous and synchronous, because you don't always need to meet with each other. And sometimes it is actually better to just, like I said, document something out, have it clear and really thought through before you start to present it to somebody. And then of course there is a time where an actual like real-time meeting is best and most appropriate. But we found there's oftentimes a lot of steps you can do asynchronously to get there. So we do that internally, but we also do that with a lot of our external people. So like contractors or attorneys, stuff like that. Like we try to handle a lot of stuff asynchronously and as much as possible. And finally, for communication, I think this is the most important thing actually, is like exercising an extreme level of patience and empathy. Again, we wouldn't be here without technology. We wouldn't be able to build the business this way, but technology isn't always the most reliable, and it is what it is. And it's network connections, devices. Sometimes Slack goes down or Google Docs goes down and all of Twitter freaks out. So just like having patience and, more so also like when it comes to like text chat, I think there's a lot of opportunities depending on what mood I'm in or what mood the other person on the other end of that text conversation, that chat conversation is in. Like there's a lot of opportunities to like misinterpret things, misunderstand things, like take things in a way that really that person never intended it to be, or maybe you were just in a bad mood and took it a way that wasn't necessary at all. So just always defaulting to giving folks the benefit of the doubt that their intentions are good, like operating off of a base layer of trust has been something that I think has been critical. Because there's been times where like Zach and I are slacking and I'm just like, wait, what did he mean by that? And instead of just like spending all this unnecessary time of like trying to think of his intentions, I just default to like, I know Zach, he's a good guy. He wants this thing to work as much as I do. Like his intentions are probably good. And if it requires further follow up, then definitely addressing it as needed. But again, defaulting that most people are coming from a good place and that we can trust that they have good intentions. So definitely practicing that, and empathy as well. And also just like, we're working from home. So like stuff's going to happen. Kids are going to come in, or a dog's going to be barking, or significant others are going to be in the background. My girlfriend's dresser is right here. So sometimes she needs to get a shirt or something. And yeah, it is what it is. And I think we just all got to be understanding that this is the environment that we're living in, and it's okay for those breaks and disruptions, and just take it easy. Don't get too stressed out on that. All right. And finally, so building chemistry from home, closing the distance. So one thing that's really important to me is like ensuring that we do have a very positive and healthy and thriving culture. But it's a little bit more challenging to do when everybody's working from home and again on different schedules and working in different time zones. So how do you foster that? How do you create that environment? Because a lot of it, though, at least working at like the old companies I worked at, like a lot of this stuff just happened organically, and it's not something that you can necessarily. I mean, that's kind of the magic, is that it does happen organically. So how do you make that happen in this environment? And what I've learned is that the best things will happen organically, but it's about being like intentional about providing those opportunities. So one of the things that we've done is make time online to bond beyond work. So we'll do like we have like games together online, and or we'll do like happy hour where we try our best not to talk about work. And I was a little resistant to this, to be honest, at first, because I was like, the last thing that anybody is going to want to do is jump on another Zoom call. Like, I do think Zoom fatigue is a real thing. I've certainly felt it after a day of just nonstop Zoom calls or Google Meet calls or whatever. But I've certainly turned around on this particular notion of like, well, when else are we going to be able to bond with each other that's not work related? So we have to like kind of make that kind of, again, be intentional about it. And it's actually been a lot more fun than I thought. I just thought that people were going to be like, why do I have to spend more time online? And so I've been wrong about that. I'm happily wrong about that. It's been fun talking about, whatever people are doing for the weekend, what shows they're watching, how the pandemic is affecting them in their local areas, stuff like that. I guess that's not the funnest topic to talk about, but it certainly, offers bonding opportunities. So something similar though, I've learned, and I know I just mentioned in a previous slide about like trying to be super efficient and effective with our meetings. And that's just because, like, again, I want to make best use of everybody's time. I don't want anybody feeling like their time is wasted. But I have learned that leaving time for banter, or just, again, kind of like intentionally adding jokes into it, or just like non-work related things, even if it is a meeting that is work related, it is important. And that's stuff that just would happen naturally if we were all like in a meeting in an office or something like that. Like, that stuff just happens. It's stuff that I've learned that I took for granted. So again, trying to be like, it's like you're like planting seeds and seeing what grows. Like, can't force magic to happen, but you can try to kind of lead it. Again, plant those seeds. So that's what we found has worked out pretty well for us. And yeah, it's just all about trying to balance that, because again, trying to make the most of the meeting, make sure things get done, to-dos are clearly explained, but that like it's still a fun environment. And then there's no doubt that like meeting in person is a great thing, and there's advantage to that, especially with team bonding. So we've been looking for ways to do that. One of the policies that we have is that if you're like in the same location as somebody, that we encourage getting like a team lunch together. That was something that I picked up from my old company that was really awesome, was like the power of getting together and sharing a meal. So we definitely promote that, but then also use events like Podcast Movement. So Podcast Movement in Nashville was the first time that a lot of our team met each other in person for the first time, in addition to meeting our customers and fellow industry peers and just podcasters in general. So it was a really awesome opportunity for that. And it was definitely a work-related trip, but we made sure to have dinners together, do events at that. If any of you were there, that hotel in Nashville was amazing. It had so much to do there, a water park in there, so many other things. So we made sure to take use of that too, and just have that team time. And then also sending swag packages is something that we do as well. We're big fans of our swag and want to make people excited to work here. So we make sure that you get your shirts, sweatshirts, laptop bags, stuff like that, that's sent directly soon after getting employed with us. And finally, team celebrations and condolences. So there's a lot of good times, but also there's unfortunately not so good times. So making sure that we acknowledge and celebrate people's accomplishments. For instance, Ariel Nissenblatt, who's in the chat here, our community manager, was recently featured in a New York Times article, which is phenomenal. So like celebrating that was a huge deal and fun, as well as like birthdays. But also, like, there's not always good things that happen too. Unfortunately for the SquadCast team, we've had a fair amount of dog deaths in our squad team, and so making sure that we are there for each other and just supportive through those tough times is another thing that we do to build chemistry. All right. All right, so that is it with the main part of this presentation. So I focused on why SquadCast went remote and some of the benefits that we see of working remotely and building your team remotely. Then I went on to the tools, mostly software. We wouldn't be here and able to do this without the tools that are available to us now, but also had some hardware recommendations. And then third, I talked about communication and how, like, I think that's the most critical part of running an effective remote company. And then finally was closing the distance. Like, how do you improve the bond and chemistry with a team that isn't in the same location? So I hope you got some interesting nuggets from there, but I want to hear your questions. But before that, well, first, thank you. I really appreciate it. Hope you enjoyed. And then for a free month of SquadCast, please use the promo code PODMOVE21. You'll get a free month of SquadCast, and that's in addition to the 7-day free trial that everybody gets. So I'll put that in the chat here just so that everybody has it. You can copy and paste, and then we'll move on to questions. And it is all caps, by the way. Whoops.
Okay, so
Alrighty, questions.
A real quick comment that we saw was that's a great point about not being tied to a location. We have that flexibility where I was, and it has let us hire awesome people.
Rabia,
So,
that's a fellow Squad Pod community member. Hey, Rabia, thanks for joining us.
All right. And then here's a fun question. Let's see. Is it better to hire someone to do what you were mentioned, especially if you are not that technical?
Ooh, it is a good question. So I'm a big believer in, like, I want to know the people that we're hiring. I want to know the people that we work with. Like, people are the most important thing to me at SquadCast. Like, I know our customers are a big part of this, and we wouldn't be here without them. But like, for me, it's about taking care of our employees first, because that's who's taking care of our customers. So I want to be involved in that. What's his name? He has a podcast. His name's he's the co-founder of LinkedIn, Reed Hoffman. He recommends, now this is for like a startup that's going to grow to, be a huge company. He says that, like, the founder should interview the first 500 employees, and was like serious about it. He's like, no, I'm literally saying you should be not like sourcing and interviewing necessarily, but you should be involved in that interview hiring process at some point for the first 500 employees. So we got a long ways to go, and I've certainly been enjoying it. So my recommendation, Millen, it looks like your name is that it is better to hire someone, or excuse me, do the hiring yourself.
All right. We also have another question from Millen. What's the best microphone for the podcast room, not sound to echo? I'm having serious issues with that.
Oh, okay. Well, definitely depends on what microphone you're using, but it's also the environment. Tanner Campbell actually had a pretty cool article that was featured, in Pod News, that talked about how, like, demonstrating the difference of having, like, great microphones, but like poor mic technique, and how much that impacted the quality. So first, I would say make sure that your mic technique is you're using the proper mic technique. That has a huge impact on your quality. And the best part about it is it's free. It just takes a little bit of behavior change. And I definitely struggle with this. I tend to be pretty animated and was all over the place when I was talking. But the microphone that we recommend, really anything that's a dynamic microphone, it's generally the best for capturing, like, spoken word, and it doesn't capture a lot of other sounds that are happening around you. So the microphone I'm using right now is an ATR 2100. There's another one called the Samsung Q2U. Why I recommend those microphones is because they're very affordable. Both, I believe, are under $100. They're durable, so that you can take them with you, travel with them and stuff like that. That's what I do. So I like that part about them. And they sound great. So again, you don't need to break the bank to sound great, but definitely recommend that if you are seeing some echoes, that it could be that you need to use a dynamic microphone versus a condenser microphone. But even with a condenser microphone, like any microphone, mic technique is a must.
Well said. So, Rock, we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. We certainly appreciate it, and we've had a number of people say thank you in the chat. You mentioned the free month of SquadCast, so people can use promo code PODMOVE. That's PODMOV21, and they can go to SquadCast.fm for that. And then, Rock, if people want to connect with you or some of the team online, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, the best place to do that is, well, if you're looking for more information about SquadCast, squadcast.fm is our website. We have a ton of information about what we do, but also just like best practices and tips on how to improve your remote podcasting. And the best place to find us is on all the socials at SquadCast.fm. You could also find me at Rockwell Felder.
Okay, great. And then we always like to close out with final thoughts. Do you have a final thought for us, Rock?
Final thought. Yeah. So I guess it's I'm curious to hear what people think about this. So please reach out to me on Twitter or LinkedIn because again, this is a new topic, but it's something that I think is incredibly interesting. I think like again that analogy I hope fits that like I feel like we're like kind of pioneers, but we're not like Lewis and Clark. We're not the first to discover the West Coast, but we're on the Oregon Trail. We know that and the road is like we're early adopters and figuring this thing out as we go. So I'm really curious to hear what people think and what people's experience has been like working remotely. Is that something that you want? Is it something that you like? Is your company embracing it? Stuff like that. I'm really curious about that because we're big proponents of it, but also understand that there are some challenges and curious about that.
Absolutely. So we got this helped a lot.
Great.
This was really great. Thanks for sharing.
Oh, that makes it worth it.
So much love, Rock, and rightfully so. Thank you again, and look forward to having you back soon. And yes, everybody stay safe.
All right. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Rock.